You're looking good. Your hair specifically, man. I swear you were going balding at one point. Your hair, you had your hat off a second ago. It was looking really good.
Yeah, well, it's a sore subject, but yes, I was balding, and now I'm taking medication for it, and now I'm not balding.
So you're taking hair medication.
I'm taking hair medication, and by no means are we sponsored by anything, but I use Keeps. It's like I take a pill every day, and then I do like droplets on the hair twice a day.
Really?
Yeah.
So you do 2 drops per day or something like that? There's a certain amount required?
Yeah, they give you like a liter, or not a liter, like a what do you call it? Droplet, whatever. Anyway, yeah, I squirt on my hair a couple times a day, and all of a sudden I have hair again.
So what if you wanted like really long hair? Could you just empty the full bottle?
No, long hair is 280s, dude.
But I'm just hypothetically, if you
it doesn't work like that. It just reactivates the hair follicles
to what they would be normally.
I guess. I'm not a scientist, man. I just have hair. That's all that matters.
So you couldn't go to keeps.com and say, there's dreadlocks, there's afro.
No, you can't. You can't choose a hairdo, dude. Can you imagine? Hey, sorry for sitting through that. Welcome back to Monday Mojo. We're here at the Monday Mojo Sports Desk, episode 62. We had a hell of an episode for you today. We had the pleasure of speaking with Chris Egan, weekend sports anchor at King 5. He's back on the show, along with a fellow coworker of Evan at King 5, Joel Knip. He's a sports producer.
Well, Joel Knip is to Chris Egan what Evan Barron is
to us.
To Monday Mojo.
That is correct. Producer. Yes. So we had all sorts of great baseball insight brains on this episode. We talked everything ranging from Ichiro Hall of Fame weekend, which Evan, Chris, and I had the pleasure of going to on Saturday. We talk Julio. We talk playoff odds. I was just telling Evan, like, we couldn't have made a better episode doing this ourselves.
Yeah.
So everything you need to hear about Mariners from this past week is interview with Chris Egan and Joel Knip.
There is one thing that I did want to bring up. I know Evan's got something to say too. I witnessed something just the craziest thing I've ever seen at a baseball game. Jake Lamb, this isn't it, but
we should have brought
tie in. We'll bring Jake Lamb up right now. Jake Lamb, good for you, man. First Mariners home run since first Mariners home run of your career, and obviously growing up in Seattle, that's got to be every dream fulfilled in the backyard as a kid with one swing right there.
Yeah.
But so that homer happens, and everybody, I was in 306, way up in the boonies,
way up in the right field third bleachers that are
never
90% of the time not populated whatsoever.
And so everybody's got kind of going nuts, and just as it's dying down, the fans' reactions of Jake Lamb's homer, there's this guy walking up, and he falls, and he hits his head on the railing.
Was he drunk?
No, I don't think so. I thought he was, right? And so then he goes, like, as he's falling to the ground, I'm like, oh, like, that's a wipeout. And then he starts kind of, like, his eyes shut, and then he starts shaking really, really aggressively. And I'm like, holy, what's going on? And then somebody goes, he's having a seizure. And then all of a sudden, this guy starts foaming out of his mouth, and he's having a legit seizure. And like EMTs come up, and let me tell you, man, that was some of the scariest I've ever seen at a game.
I've witnessed one of those things happen.
I didn't. It was literally right next to me, and I'm like, what do I do? Like, I didn't know.
You would have been useless. The only thing you're supposed to do when you see and you're not medically trained, put them on their side so they don't drown in their own vomit or foam or whatever, and then elevate the head.
Yeah. So I guess actually this is a good PSA. If you do see somebody having a seizure, you start a timer immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And if it goes over 2 minutes, that's too much time of oxygen not reaching the brain. And so that's where it gets really, really life threatening. So once they stop seizing, and as long as it's not over 2 minutes, you're good. But while they're seizing, put them on their side so they don't choke on their stuff, and obviously call 911 right away. But he ended up being fine. He walked off on his own power with the EMTs, so that was really great. Other than that, hell of a series.
Hell of a series.
bummer that Andres Munoz showed that he was not a super he wasn't superhuman and that he's a normal human, and he did give up a couple runs.
But we forgive him.
We do.
He's been lights out all season.
He has, and it was great. It was great. So we're sitting now half game back of Tampa Bay. We have gotten a lot of help this week from teams I didn't think that we were going to get help from. The Boston Red Sox and our best friends, just a state or two away, down in California, the Angels taking it to the Blue Jays.
Yep.
Damn.
In Toronto.
In Toronto. So hey, Los Angeles Angels, Anaheim Angels, I should say. Thank you for
your service.
For helping us out. Thanks for your service.
They also played spoiler for us at the last series of last season. Remember we lost that series?
Yeah, but sure, we did lose that series, but the last game of the season, even if we won that game, Boston won.
Well, if we would have swept the Angels, we would have,
Yep. But now, then we wouldn't have that chance to have the drought end this year.
True.
It's bittersweet, right? When it doesn't happen, you still have the chance next year to feel those emotions for the first time in your entire life. That's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting to feel some emotions I've never felt.
All your emotions about baseball, man. Give me a freaking playoff appearance.
That's what I'm saying. I can't. Those emotions for when the playoff appearance happens, are going to be something I've never felt in my life.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready for it. I'm preparing my body, my brain.
And we hope you are too. Make sure to subscribe and comment and like and whatnot.
I just wanted to bring this up real quickly because I just said I'd do it. I just want to give a shout out to my boy Matt Mucci from Bozeman, Montana.
Matthew Mucci.
Yeah, Schwabi and him go way back, but I was at my 10-year high school reunion last night at O'Day, and I was talking to Much, and he was just saying how he loves this podcast. He's been a fan from day one, listens to every episode, and he doesn't really have that much being in Montana to really keep up on the Mariners. So we're doing him right, and so just want to give him some love for being an avid listener, and so yeah.
I've been wondering.
Hold on. Miss you, Matt Mucci. What I will say is the audacity of O'Day to rent out the goddamn beer garden.
They didn't rent it out, Max.
Oh.
No,
we just rented out by another.
Oh, I was misinformed. I apologize. Another shout out to Cam Breen, another regular listener to us. He was at the game on Saturday. Good seeing you, pal.
Well, with that being said, shout out to everybody who listens to us. I love every single one of you. I appreciate every single one of you. And you guys are what makes this so much fun. And with that being said, let's kick it off to Chris Egan interview with Joel Knip. And as always, go Mariners.
Go M's.
Well, hey, fellas, really appreciate you coming in. Chris, for you coming back on. Joe, great to have you on. First time guest. That's awesome.
But do more of an official intro.
We'll do more of official intro. We'll do that on the first segment right before we open. But we'll get you. We'll plug you guys right. And Chris, I'm curious, man, just to first hear you interviewed or in the interview at least with Ichiro.
Yeah.
Right? So talk to us about that. What that Hall of Fame kind of interview, what it was like on your perspective, and just the overall weekend. I mean, I was at the park for one of the games, but let's hear your thoughts.
Well, I think, Chris, it was a magical week. I mean, 3 days, you've got 45,000 in there every night, and obviously they were there for Ichiro, but they're also there now, which is different than years past. They're there for a team which is in the middle of a playoff hunt. But Ichiro was amazing on Friday. The media met with him on Friday. He dealt with the American media first. And you know what? For the first time, we saw some emotion from Ichiro. I've been covering him for 20 plus years. And I think that's one of the big complaints about Ichiro through the years is we never really got to know him as a person. We knew him as a baseball player, but we didn't know, Ichiro, the family guy, Ichiro, the guy that loves dogs, Ichiro, the guy that loves, to eat burgers, Ichiro, the guy that loves to eat chicken wings if he can. Just do Ichiro, the guy that knows how to get hits, the guy that stretches for 2 hours, and plays baseball. But I asked him the first question just about what it meant to go to the Hall of Fame, and you could see tears kind of in his eyes. And the Japanese media were like, "Oh my gosh, is he going to start crying? Is it really going to happen?" And So I think it was kind of nice that he took his guard down a little bit. He spoke from the heart. He didn't speak as a baseball player. He spoke just as a person that fell in love with his city. It was great to hear that. Later on in the press conference, I asked him, gosh, the fans have embraced you since day one. And I said, what are you going to say to them? And he gives his answer in Japanese, and all the Japanese media start laughing. I'm like, are they laughing at my question, or what's going on here? And basically, to translate that, he was going to wait and give that message to the fans on Saturday night during the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and he hit it out of the park, guys. I mean, he really did. I thought it was a really good speech that he gave. I love the humor. I loved him taking shots at Ken Griffey Jr. I loved him taking shots at Jamie Moyer. I mean,
yeah.
And then he spoke from the heart, and talking with some of the Mariners players, they loved the fact that he spoke to them about, hey, you guys can do this, and he's a consultant to a lot of those guys. And he gave a lot of great messages to the former players, to the current players, and to the fans. And it really was a magical week. And hopefully the Mariners can run with this. And, they'll 6 games on the road, they'll be back home, and we can hopefully keep it rolling.
Yeah, exactly. On the topic of, it was funny because it was ideal timing for this kind of weekend, especially with the hype around the Mariners, 94% chance in playoffs, which we'll get to. 94.2, yeah. Got to throw in the point.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. But it was funny because obviously we're going there for Ichiro, but at the same time, in the back of our minds, it's about the playoffs.
Yeah.
And Ichiro made sure to recognize that. And that was something that got me especially hyped. Outside of the Jamie Moyer story, which I had to sit down. I was chuckling so hard. But you're right. For the longest time, we didn't really know who he was as a person. We did have, when we were talking with Willie, he would go into like his pregame rituals, and he's very dedicated to the game. But it was really something special watching Ichiro last night. And Chris Soba and I were both there last night.
Evan was there.
And Evan was there as well. All 3 of us were there, all doing our own thing and celebrating in the beer garden and whatnot. But lots of fun baseball this weekend.
Well, I'm actually curious because we didn't go to the beer garden because it seems like the M's, I get it. You're a business. You want to make as much money as you can. All these big games, the garden's rented out. Edgar's Cantina's rented out. And so the Trident deck, that was rented out. And so nobody, if you had a normal ticket, you couldn't go and sit in those seats. And we bought ours in the way up in the 300 level in right field, I think pretty close to where Vogie actually hit that home run way back when. And weren't able to go to the garden. Do you have any insight onto other than making more money as to why they're doing that on like the biggest days of the weekend?
If you have a party, you can rent it out. But Chris, I'm gonna shake the podcast right here tonight and say, if you're in the garden, are you really a fan? Because if you're in the garden fan, you can't even really watch the game and focus on the game.
Well, they got music blaring, and you don't know what's happening at all.
Hold on, if you're like me though,
yeah, it's in there. I mean, you can't focus on the game. So I mean, I love the pen, I love Edgar's Cantina, but we got less than 40 games to go. We've got to be in the seats focused on this team.
And I couldn't agree more. When I go to a game, I want to watch, but I'll say this: there ain't no better seat in that house. If you get there 2 hours early, you can be in that front row. You can get your cell phone charged in the beer garden. You're in the front row. There's no better seat. It's just straight center field. And so that's when I go and I'm like, all right, I'm going to make sure I get there early enough. I get that front row seat, and I'll stay there for the first 2 hours before the game starts. It's happy hour. You're not spending an arm and a leg on beer as you would normal time. But if you're going to the garden and it's just there to drink beer and chat, that ain't the way I'm going to do it,
And let's be honest, the ultimate of any fan is to catch a home run in your beer.
Yeah.
Drink beer. I mean, we all dream of that. A game 7 of the World Series or catching a ball in a beer. I mean, that's.
Oh, yeah. And you're never selling that ball.
No.
If I ever catch a home run ball in general, I'm never selling that. I've gotten 2 foul balls, never gotten a homer though. No.
So let's talk baseball here. So I brought up the 94.2% playoff chances, and Joel, I want your take on this too. But we're at a position right now in the season where, dare I say, let's make the assumption that we're in. that said, what should we be focusing on right now, right? Like, where do we ideally want to end up in the wild card standings? Obviously, we're not going to catch up to Houston, but we kind of want to think about our placement strategically, right? Because the way it's set up right now is ideally we want a 3-game homestand with that first wild card spot. The third wild card spot, as it stands, we play the Guardians, and then that would put us on track to play the Yankees instead of the Astros, which I believe to be very much a more beneficial situation for us. But what should we be focusing on?
I'm gonna still answer it first, Max, but I can't believe you're going here, Max. I mean, you and Chris and Evan were in diapers when we were
I know.
You're talking playoffs, and we got 30 games to go.
We have been waiting for this moment. This is why we started this podcast. It's time for us to start thinking big.
Well, I think that's the big thing, is just making the playoffs. Anything can happen. They got great starting pitching. They need to get better hitting because they haven't been very clutch lately with hits. But, that's going to come. It's just going to take some time for those guys to get healthy. But I don't think it really matters where they are in the playoffs. I think they could even beat the Astros in the playoffs just because they have such strong starting pitching. Like over the last 12 games, their ERA for their starting pitching is 2.50. You can have your starters do that day in, day out. You got a chance. And that's all the Mariners need, is a chance.
I know. I agree, but I'm almost getting selfish here. How do we make it a more sustainable playoff run? Sure, it's going to be great to be.
You can't agree with Joel, Max. I mean, the pitching is phenomenal. And yes, I would put Ray, Kirby, Gonzalez, Gilbert, Castillo up against any starting 5 in all of baseball right now. But to win a game, yes, we hear defense wins, but you got to get one more run than the other team. And I'm telling you what, you had 4 hits on Sunday. Sure, you win the game. You had 3 hits on Saturday. You lose that game. Yes, all 3 of the hits were home runs. You've got to find a way to get more hits. I mean, I'm not talking home runs. You've just got to find a way. It's old school on base percentage. But we've got the offense has got, I mean, you can't expect Ray, Kirby, Gonzalez, Gilbert, Castillo to throw perfect games. And we will get the day where Munoz has a bad day. And it's going to happen. Our bullpen, they're human. I mean, they're going to give up a run. So we've got to be able to bounce back with that offense. So I don't know what you do at this point. You just kind of, you heard from Ty France on Sunday. He had a home run and a single. He was seeing the ball better. You get Ty France going a little bit more. I thought JP was starting to turn things around a little bit. So somehow the offense needs to click more. Because you get in the playoffs, you're going to face the best pitchers in all of baseball. So but I don't know what the answer is for you on that one. I mean, I like the lineup we have. I don't think we should be making any big moves right here and bringing anybody up from Tacoma. Everybody's like, oh, Evan White's hot. Jared Kelenich's hot. No, I think we've dealt with that already. We've got the lineup we're going to go with. So you just got to hope guys like Ty France start clicking a little bit more. And we'll see here.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's going to happen with Ty France. I mean, today he goes 2 for 3. Yeah, I believe.
Yep.
A homer. Yeah, he had
2.
Yeah, he had the homer, and then he had the single, and I think that's his first homer. I forget how long, but every hit that he had after coming back from being injured was a single until that home run. And so to see him get that power back, maybe it's now going to swing his confidence too. No pun intended. But we'll see. So hopefully Ty can stay on that track, and if he can, I mean, do we keep him at the 5 spot? Do we move him back to 2? What are you thinking?
Well, Servais has had such a weird lineup. He's gone back and forth from like even putting Julio at the top, Julio at the 3 spot, everywhere, Ty France, everywhere. I think you just got to trust Servais is going to do the right thing, and hopefully these guys get hot and they come with a steady lineup, and everyone starts knowing their roles and start hitting.
And quite honestly, I mean, I'd like to have Haggerty as more of a concrete spot in the lineup. I mean, sure, like utility player, and that's great, but like while we're on the topic of getting hits, he makes that happen. And in that department, we need any help we can get.
The question, Max, is where do you put him? I've heard this is, does he take over for Winker? And and Winker's kind of been one of the leaders on this team, and the last thing you want to do is mess with the word is chemistry, and in that clubhouse it's a small fraternity in there, so you start doing that. But I agree with you, Max. I think Haggerty, he's a baller. He's a baseball player. He's going to grind and find a way to get on. I mean, he can't lay down a bunt. He's going to throw his helmet down and knock himself out. But I mean, this guy he loves this game, and he's going to find a way to battle and get on it. And arguably, he is one of your best on-base percentage players here in this second half of the season.
Yep.
And I think what Servais did today was a beautiful way to put him in, somehow get him into the lineup. I know he's still got something going on with his finger, but sure, we'll have Winker play the first number of innings. He came in to sub for Winker in the 8th inning today on Sunday, and can't use his bat, but you can still use his glove, still use his speed. I mean, he's essentially like a 5-tool player, right? Maybe his arm's not the best, but no, I'm talking Sam Haggerty.
Oh, I was like, no.
Winker's got a few tools. He ain't got 5 though. But it's just that's Servais, Joel, as you were saying. It's trust and Servais doing his thing. He's going to find a way to get Haggerty into the lineup. And playoff teams have guys like Haggerty, guys that can come in pinch runs, come in, take defense, find a way to get on base when healthy if they're in the lineup for that. But I'm loving what we're seeing from Haggerty. I like having him at the 9 spot. Get that guy in the 9 spot. He finds a way to get on base. Julio Rodriguez is up next.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of this sport is who would ever thought at the beginning of the season when Chris went to spring training that Sam freaking Haggerty was going to be a key role player for the Players. He was like,
he wasn't on my list. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
He was going to be one of their best hitters per average on the team. Like it's unreal, but you need guys like that. You need like the Dylan Moores, the Haggertys to step up and when they're called upon to perform. And he's doing a great job this season.
And yet, guys, with all that said, as we pump up Haggerty and Dylan Moore had a big home run. You at the same point, yes, Joel's right. You need these guys to kind of find roles and step up, but you need your stars to be stars. And J. Rod and Mitch Haniger and J.P. Crawford, they have to take over this team and become leaders. And one of those three has to come through with almost a big game down the stretch here. And JP has been electric at shortstop. So, if his hitting's down, he definitely makes up for it, with his play at short. But, you're going to need Mitch and you're going to need J-Rod to come through with big hits down the stretch here. And, Adam Frazier is going to just quietly do his job as well over at second base.
Yeah.
I think he's going to get you some good at-bats that they need to get better with hitting. So we'll see.
On the topic of Mitch, what are your thoughts on re-signing him?
Is there any money left? Is there?
I don't know. After the Julio deal, which we'll talk about, but I don't know.
If somebody from the organization came over to King 5 asked if they could borrow $10 today, so I didn't know if that was
We
it.
should all go around the city, pass the hat. Just chip in.
We can do the Salvation Army thing outside of the stadium entrances.
Joel answer first, and then I'll chime in.
Yeah,
That's a tough one because when Mitch is healthy, he's like one of their better players. I don't know if you can break the bank for him, but knowing at his age, he probably wants his first bite at a payday. He wants to make as much money as possible. Now it's up to the Mariners if they can afford that, if they can fit him in. They obviously have the money because they really haven't spent much money at all up until this year with Julio. So, it's all going to depend on Dipoto's long-term vision for the team because in 2 years, Castillo's going to be up. You just paid Robbie Ray a ton of money. Logan Gilbert, probably in a couple of years, his arbitration dollars will be done. So, yeah, I think you got to keep him. I don't know, you just can't break the bank for him.
When he's playing, I love him. The key there being when.
Yeah.
And this is a guy he's done a lot during the offseason to try to stay healthy and just continues to get bad luck with that. Let's knock on wood that he's good for the rest of the way here, because he's definitely, he's a guy. I know Servais always brags about Carlos Santana being Mr. Clutch. Well, Mitch Haniger is also pretty clutch down the stretch, and it doesn't seem to phase him, whether it's the first inning or the ninth inning, they're down 1 with 2 outs and he's at the plate. So you want that guy on your team, especially if you're heading into the playoffs. You need some of that kind of veteran leadership down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's important to note too is you're totally right. Carlos Santana is a clutch dude, but he's not as consistent like Mitch.
Yeah.
And there's a massive, there's much more valuability into something like that. And it brings up the question, which I'm sure we'll be talking about for the rest of the season, is sustainability, right? The end goal is obviously get to the playoffs, do our best, make it as far as we can. The odds are going to be not in our favor, but we also got to think about next year. And our odds are, we need to keep increasing the odds. And that's going to put a lot of tough decisions with Jerry Dipoto, I would imagine.
Well, when you have games like today where they're selling out the crowd, there's going to be a lot more money for the Mariners to.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think they'll have enough money to pay Haniger if they want. I just don't know if they want to break the bank for him. And I don't know if you guys, how do you guys feel? Do you think they should keep Haniger?
I do. I would love it. I would love Mitch to stay. I mean, it's the veteran leadership. I know he doesn't have any playoff experience, but he's got he's just solidified himself into the clubhouse and the passion that he brings. And I know he said in an interview, I think it was Daniel Kramer, it's like, I understand people think I'm kind of a robot sometimes. He goes, fair enough. I get it, but don't get it misconstrued that he's saying like, I want to win just as bad, if not more than anybody else in this clubhouse. And, people can't forget that wonderfully written Players Tribune article that he did before the season started.
End of the last season.
Yeah, at the end of last season. And he wants this for not himself only, but also not only the team, but the city, everybody involved. And it's tough to get somebody new, whether it's from the farm system or whether it's via trade, to feel that exact same way about the city, right? And he's been here for so long. It's just one of those unmeasurables in baseball, right? That can't be looked at just by numbers. And so I would love to see Mitch stay. I'll agree, Joel, we can't break the bank on him, especially because who knows how much longer he'll last in the league. What is he, 28?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so we'll see what the contract looks like. I know Stanton in the press conference with Julio, which was awesome to see, a ton of teammates. I know Ty was there, Mitch was there, a number of others for Julio's interview of the contract extension. But at the end of it, Stanton goes, there's other people in this room right now that I want to get a contract as well. And so maybe he was talking Ty, maybe he was talking Mitch, maybe both. I don't know, but we'll see what happens with that.
It's funny, Chris, you mentioned, Mitch hasn't been in the playoffs and doesn't have playoff experience, but
right.
I go back to spring training when he talked about how he spends a lot of time in ice buckets and he pretends like he is in the playoffs and, and how you have to control you. And he does it to actually control his breathing. And because he says when that moment does come, you're not going to know what's going to hit you. You've got to be able to kind of control yourself when you're at the plate. So, I mean, he hasn't been there, but he's preparing himself like he has been. So, and you're right. He's the guy, Scott Servais. You just write his name down in the lineup and you're good to go. You don't worry about him out there in right field. You're like, okay, he's going to give me a good at bat every time. He's going to play great defense out in right field. He's not going to mess around in the clubhouse. He'll get the job done. And as a manager, it's nice to have players like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Julio's extension.
Let's talk about Julio.
Let's talk about J-Rod, the J-Rod show. What's first take on that? I know it's, from what I understand, it's 8 years guaranteed, $210 million guaranteed, tons of unique options within this specific contract. Jerry Dipoto did say this is the first time ever we're in contract negotiations with the player that they had put in MVP type of
incentives,
MVP incentives, where he finishes in the voting, if it's first, second, third, or whatever. How much insight do you guys have on that?
Well, I mean, I love the incentives part of that because that just pushes you as a player. When you can try to perform and make the top three on MVP voting or win the MVP and more millions are coming in, that just pushes you to work harder as a player, where the cash isn't just all there guaranteed. Sure, there's a couple $100 million guaranteed. That's not bad. The only thing is with incentives, I wish these contracts, and unfortunately the Players Union won't allow this, I wish we had decentives in these contracts. If these guys got hurt, if they batted under the Mendoza line, things like, let's take some of that. If you get in trouble for putting some drugs in your system and you can't play all of a sudden, like a couple other players out there, let's take some money back. But I still like the incentives. I think Julio Rodriguez is is needed in Seattle. The Seahawks needed DK Metcalf to sign. The Mariners needed this with Julio Rodriguez. As we talk about the younger generations, Russell Wilson left us. Ken Griffey Jr. is, the guy that I grew up watching. He was the fan favorite. Now you have one in Julio Rodriguez, and he will be here. He is the kid that 10 and 12 and 13-year-olds playing Little League are buying his jersey. If you watch the Little League World Series on ESPN and ABC, a lot of these kids from Sumner and Bonnie Lake, who's your favorite player? Julio Rodriguez. So, this is the guy that is going to kind of take over this city for the next, 10 years, along with DK Metcalf. And it's a lot of money for a guy that hasn't played one full year in baseball. Incredible amount of money for that. But you know what? This Mariners organization has been watching him for a lot longer than 1 year. They feel good with it. I'm happy with it.
It is the of the century for the Mariners. And I know that sounds weird to say, but I guarantee you in 5 to 10 years, he is going to be one of the lowest paid players in Major League Baseball. And they're taking a chance, of course, right now. He could get hurt. Something weird could happen. But if he progresses the way he's been progressing through their whole system, it's going to be so cheap. Just think of Ken Griffey Jr. at that age. If you could have got Ken Griffey Jr. for the going price of being paid players back in 93 or 94 when he was a big deal, and you would have had like $3 or $4 million a year for like the next 15 years. You'd have gone, who is the genius that signed Ken Griffey Jr.? I think he's been a star since he was 16 when he signed with the Mariners. They loved his attitude. He was always very friendly with people. And you guys saw the All-Star game. He was electric there. Like, he's going to take over baseball. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a huge bargain for the Mariners. And both sides kind of have off-ramps if they so choose to. I think Julio will not leave Seattle. He loves Seattle, like Felix Hernandez loved Seattle.
And this inside, and Joel mentions he was electric at the MLB All-Star game. And in talking with the Mariners and the PR staff, he's the one guy where they said, hey, Egan, give us a little warning if you need him. Because, he is on so much demand, not just from the media in Seattle, from the national media. And we have not had a player like that where, the rest of the world wants to be with him. We've had a couple. We just saw one get inducted into the Hall of Fame for the Mariners, this past weekend in Ichiro, where Japanese media would fly in from Tokyo.
That's international media.
Yeah, that's international media. But we haven't had a ton of those stars, over the past decade with this team, and we've got one now. And I'm excited, and I agree with Joel. I think seems like a lot of money now. It's kind of deals that we're signing here at King 5. I know Joel.
What I think is so funny is you had mentioned Julio and high demand for the media. I think we interviewed him when the demand was a little bit less.
We did.
And that was to this day the only active Mariner baseball player we've interviewed. So I think it's kind of funny. Sure, Julio's got time for a local podcast.
I'm not part Max and Chris of your marketing department, but if I'm you, I'm throwing that out there. Hey, the players we interview signed big deals.
Yep, that's right.
Podcast.
We've got the eye too.
Apparently, if you come on Monday Mojo, you're going to get a $210 million 8-year contract. So it'd be a good idea to come on. So.
That's funny.
That is funny. Well, I'm excited, man. It's pretty great to see just obviously everybody, not just the fans, but now ownership committing to Julio. We had Jason Churchill on the pod a couple weeks ago, and we brought this up. We were like, hey, when is this contract going to happen? And apparently the Julio's team approached management right before the All-Star break. And then that's kind of when the discussions started. But when we were talking with Church, there were the possibilities of, do they do like a 4-year, 5-year deal with Julio first, and then, kind of see where he's at with his career, then trying to sign him to a bigger deal. And man, I just was like, I don't want any of that. I want a full lifetime contract, pay the man, give him his bag, whatever he needs, whatever he asks for, give it to him. And I am just over the moon excited.
And it does instill that hype to the city.
It's just it shows that
like the sleeper Mariner fans are gonna start waking up.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna be like, this guy's the real deal. maybe I should start investing more. And then we start talking about filling seats. And then ownership is able to spend more.
Well, there's the sleeper Mariner fans, and then there's the Mariner fans that just they don't want to get hurt. They don't want to get hurt.
I know all about it. You know all about it.
Hurt too much over the years. It's like they, put up with that perfect girlfriend, and they don't want to get back. So fans as well.
John Mellencamp said it best. It hurts so good, and I've said that about the Seattle Mariners for.
He tells that to me every single weekend.
All the time.
Drive me nuts.
Sports are supposed to hurt. They're supposed to kill your soul, and then they're supposed to revive it. They come back, and for those fans like ourselves, everybody on this Zoom right now, it's gonna pay dividends when this streak ends because we put in the work. We put in the equity, the sweat equity as fans, and for those people who haven't, they'll still be pumped. But for me, and I know myself, I'll be crying. I'll be losing my absolute mind, and it's gonna just feel so good when this streak officially does end.
It's a hell of a time to be a Mariner. That's all we can say with this.
Back into the Julio stuff. Like, I think people are going to become such Julio fans. People are going to go Russell who here.
Yeah.
In the next months. Like,
Sure.
He's going to be a superstar like we've never seen since Ken Griffey. Like, I think he's going to be bigger than Russell.
And Joel's bragging of Julio, Max and Chris. You guys, keep talking. The great pitching staff. We're talking all. But let's just be honest on the podcast right now. Who needs to get re-signed right now with a big deal? Perry Hill, the infield coach. I mean, we are talking, guys, about the number one defense. He's making Gino Suarez look like a Gold Glover over there.
I know.
How can we
pay
Perry Hill more money for the job this guy has done with the Mariners defense? I think that has been lost in all of this. Is obviously the pitching's great and J-Rod's great and Ichiro. But this team if we watch them night in and night out, how many years when we look back, there's an error, base running error. It was just so many errors through these 20 years of this playoff drought. This team, I tell you what, is one of the most disciplined defensive teams I have seen ever in Mariners history before.
One of the situations when you bring that up that immediately comes to my mind is when Matt Brash was pitching against the Yankees and he gets the behind the back catch. That we could maybe attribute that to Perry. I doubt that behind the back catch was anything Perry did, but I watched that replay so many times, and you see Matt Brash get the ball, he checks the runner, doesn't throw it right away, but then he gets the ball to Gino, I believe, but Matt Brash covers his position at third base, and then you see the left fielder coming in, you see Haggerty from center coming in to get ready to cover second base. Everybody was covering their positions on that pickle. They knew where they needed to be, and they went right there, wasting no time.
Unlike that incident with the Angels.
When they butchered.
They don't have Perry Hill.
No, they don't. They threw it to home, and then Max Stassi leaves home plate wide open. And so that's stuff I see, and I'm like, damn, Perry Hill, I see you. I know what you're doing.
Same thing happened the other day when Suarez made that diving catch. Check the guy to third. You could see JP running over towards the base. It was just fluid. It was like poetry in motion, seeing everyone doing their job exactly how it's supposed to be done at every single second. Like, I agree with Chris. Perry Hill, sign him up.
I know Jerry DePoto watches this, so Jerry, get the checkbook out.
Gotten close on getting Jerry DePoto. No,
I got an email response from him. I'm not going to say I got that close. He said, "I appreciate you reaching out and being a fan. I ain't got time right now, though." So maybe one day, we'll see. So what are you guys thinking? This last series, obviously, it was great. A sweep would have been amazing, but this is I'm looking at this series with Cleveland and coming up, not really with Detroit, but Cleveland again, and then we've got Atlanta.
That'll be tough.
We got San Diego down the road, but it's kind of another. This last month, it's supposedly like the easiest stretch of games for any team. The Mariners have that, right? But I'm glad that we still have those tests, right, with Atlanta. What's that, Chris?
Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, Atlanta, San Diego, Angels, Oakland, KC, Texas, Oakland again. Yeah, at Cleveland, I think is going to be tough. I think they showed that they are a very good pitching and defensive team as well. It may not be easy to win there, but you look at the rest of the schedule, I tell you what, it does look pretty nice for this team.
Yeah. I think they got a good shot. I mean, all they got to do is get their bats going again.
Something, and I think something tells me that, I mean, when Ty was struggling, my understanding, I didn't hear him directly, but my understanding is he was pretty hard on himself, right? Like, I think when he was talking with the media or something, like, he's very aware of he's not producing what he's to his fullest potential. So he very much is like in that mindset, and you have to imagine like the rest of the boys out there are thinking the same thing. But you're right, we can't keep winning ball games with 4 or less runs. You can't do that.
Four or less hits,
and 4 or less hits, and
just a few more hits is all I'm asking.
Yeah, and a lot of things can happen with those few extra hits.
Well, and we saw that when this team, when you get the Haggertys and the Dylan Moore on base, they can cause a lot of chaos out there and make some things happen on the base pass. So, but you got to get them on there first. So that's going to be the key down the stretch, I think, for this team. I think the defense is solid, starting pitching. The bullpen has been, just an incredible story on its own. I think Scott Servais has his coaching staff dialed in where they want to be right now. So I think it's all going to come down to that timely hitting and getting more hits. And I think anything can happen if they can do that.
Yeah, I mean, also we haven't really talked about the bullpen yet, but they before last night's loss, they were 51-0 going into the 8th inning with the lead. 51-0. That's unheard of.
I did not know that.
You didn't?
They keep putting out the stats of 1-run win and 1-run game records, which we're all too familiar with. I had no idea.
Yeah, 51-0 up until last night. So I mean, you can't really blame Munoz for losing that. It was his first runs that he gave up in about a month too. So eventually, you're not going to be perfect all the time. But my point is that their bullpen's back in line like it was last year. They're ready to go. All they need is hitting. They're starting pitching with a 2.5 ERA in the last 12 starts. Their bullpen, who's been in the last 2 months, lights out.
Los Bomberos.
Yeah. And then all you need is the hitting. So, I mean, and it's going to take time. Ty France is probably struggling a little bit, but Servais is a very patient coach. He knows how to treat his star players and how to just kind of let them work through it. He's not a guy that seems to pressure people too much. And he knows eventually they're gonna start producing. So I think fans just have to take the same tack.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, on this, I did want to touch on this because this last series with Cleveland, the Mariners rotation, 25 1/3 innings pitched, only 4 earned runs, only 2 walks on 23 strikeouts in a .142 ERA. That was without George Kirby, who the game against Washington set an MLB record of 24 strikes to start off the game.
Consecutively.
24 consecutive
Well,
strikes.
that's fine, Chris. That was the only question I had with Los Bomberos was, the Spanish translation of that is firefighter to put out fires. So there hasn't been a lot of fires.
No, there hasn't been.
An insult to the starters in my mind.
Yeah. I never thought about it like that.
Whenever it gets the bullpen excited, I'm fine with it. They needed a nickname. They got one. It's kind of cool, but
and the lights fire at the top.
Yeah, but to the credit of the starters, there hasn't been major fires that they're coming in to put out.
No, there haven't. But I wanted to touch because, sure, on Twitter you've seen it's a strong either I hate or I love Marco Gonzalez, and I'm very happy to see him get out of his little funk in the opening game against Cleveland. Where do you guys sit on Marco? What do you think it's going to look like when playoff? If let's say we're in and we've got 4 games, and is Marco getting one of them?
That's a really good question, to be honest with you. Because he can be great like he was in his last start, and then we've seen some bad starts as well this season. And honestly, as you look at those 5, I would say he's probably been the most inconsistent. Out of those 5, I think
I've been saying that for weeks now.
I think he would say that, but he's also shown you that he knows how to pitch in big situations and get victories. But I don't know. I mean, that's going to be a great problem to have to try to cut out if we are in the playoffs and we're figuring that problem out. I think, it's managers will say, we've got a lot of data to work through. I think these next 35 games are going to say a whole lot. He'll pick up 5-6 starts throughout those final games. So I think how people are kind of going into the playoffs will kind of determine where they are on the rotation as well. I mean, if Marco gets hot, has 3 great starts in a row, well, you don't want to sit him, and maybe he, struggles a little. Who knows? So.
And you're right. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I think it's all come down to personally. I think, and I have no knowledge with Scott Servais on this, but how the team is rolling into the playoffs and where each pitcher is at. I think,
and it's going to be situational. I mean, depending on where the Mariners are in the series, I would trust them. I think Servais has shown a propensity to trust Marco when he gets in trouble. Let him work through stuff on the mound. So I think there's a lot of great trust between there. I just think Servais is going to pitch him. And I think they'll shorten the rotation to 4 pitchers.
They'd at least have to shorten the leash on Marco. They'd have to shorten the leash on Marco as well, right? And if he gives up that bad inning, right, get Chris Flexen ready, get him warming up.
And Chris and Max, this is the guy you guys talked about, Mitch Haniger. He wants it for this city. Well, I would argue that nobody wants it more for this city than Marco Gonzalez. A guy that lives here. A guy that wife is from here, his father-in-law, is from here, went to Gonzaga. I mean, many times in spring training, he said it last year. We can go back a couple years past when Blue Jays fans took over T-Mobile Park and Gonzalez was pissed off that, Blue Jays fans were overpowering the stadium. I could argue this guy probably wants it, more than anybody on that team for this city. So, yeah, I think I'm with Joel there. I think he's going to get a start in a playoff game. And, I feel like Scott trusts him as well. So,
Chris, I mean, if he's scuttling and just not doing very well in the last few starts of the season, then there's a chance they may skip him. But I think Marco's just too good of a player, too steady for them to not put him in there. Because if they make it to the next round, they'll want everyone to be as healthy as possible. Now, and I shouldn't jinx it, but if they do get to the World Series, that'll change. That strategy will definitely change.
Now we're talking World Series.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I was waiting for someone to. Yeah, starting salivate here.
Joel, a lot of time right there.
Well, I mean, what I'm really excited to see is because we've never been able, at least, Max, Evan, myself, never really seen playoff baseball. And I can remember, watching the highlights of Randy Johnson coming in like the 9th inning against the Yankees when he pitched the game before. It's like, do we get to see that with a Robbie Ray or Luis Castillo this year? Who knows? And so it's going to be really interesting to see how Scott manages playoff baseball. He's never done it. He's never done it in his life. And so we'll see what he's got working up his sleeve.
Well, and a little difference too is I could go back to I remember those days were great. But back then, you didn't have 3 guys in your bullpen that could hit triple digits like they do now. So, I love Robbie Ray and Castillo, but when you got Munoz firing, triple digits right there, I mean, he's one of the best in baseball right now coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah.
No question. Well, fellas, I think we're a little bit over time. I know we had 30 minutes with you, and so I'm sure you guys got any pickleball producing going on tonight, Chris?
You know what? It's the greatest sport in the world, and if you guys were really smart, I appreciate your love for the Mariners, but you'd start a pickleball podcast ASAP. It's taken over. I mean, many people said it will be the #1 participation sport in the world in less than 5 years. So, hey, jump on the podcast, start a pickleball podcast. We'll join you for that too. And, I'd love to hear Evan's thoughts next week, but I know he's tight on words tonight, so that's okay.
You'll have to make some intros for tenured pickleball players or in the industry.
Chris, I told you this last time, man. I'm gonna say I hate to toot my own horn. I don't really hate to toot my own horn. I'm a hell of a pickleball player, man.
Well,
a hell of a pickleball player.
Chris, myself and a former Mariner by the name of Jeff Cirillo teamed up today and took out a couple pros on the pickleball court. So I'm sure I can get Jeff to maybe face off against you and Max one of these days here?
I'll have to get somebody else on my team. I don't know.
No,
Max,
I'm a very athletic person. I've played.
Yeah, we
pickleball
need to make
many
this a video series for sure.
Yeah,
Make this,
I'll have to play Max one-on-one and kind of test out his skills, but
I'm a hell of a tennis player.
are you?
No.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'll take you up on that though. Any day.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Chris, thanks for hopping back on. Joel, it's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I smell a King 5 partnership brewing here.